Let's talk some Notre Dame football with Kyle Kelly. How's it going, Kyle?
It is going well. Notre Dame season is starting to trend upward, which is a good thing. It makes my life better. It's Halloween. Browns play tonight. I'm a Browns
Oh,
fan.
okay.
I know we've talked some Browns and Jets a little bit in the past,
Yeah.
but not sure how tonight's going to go against Cincinnati.
Could be the season.
Browns have actually played super well. Yeah, I mean they've played well against Joe Burrow, but yeah, so a lot of orange involved in my life this week. Syracuse on Saturday, Browns Bengals Monday, and then of course Notre Dame's going to welcome Clemson at home on Saturday.
Yeah, a very impressive win over Syracuse. There was some suspicion after Syracuse lost to Clemson that where would their mind be? And I think Notre Dame took advantage of that without question. And what did you think about the overall performance and where the team is headed right now compared to the way they started the season?
Yeah, I pretty much was impressed. I feel like they've made some tremendous strides since losing to Marshall in week 2. I mean, the season started off just so weird because they looked great against Ohio State, then played Marshall poorly, didn't look fantastic against Cal, um, and then they go back home after beating UNLV in Vegas for the Shamrock Series and drop a game they absolutely should not have lost against Stanford. And it's like, okay, well, what is this Notre
Yeah,
Dame football team?
yeah.
Like, where are they heading? Who is Marcus Freeman as a head coach? Is all this like a big mistake? And then, they beat UNLV the following week. Everyone expected that to be a win. It was 44-21. But I don't know if UNLV had scored that many points against a Power 5 opponent all season. I don't know off the top of my head. But I know coming into the game, they only scored 7 in each of the previous 2 weeks. So it wasn't like that impressive of a victory. The score looks good. Okay, 44 points, all right, for an offense that's struggling. But it's like, all right, once again, what is this Notre Dame football team? And they go into Syracuse, obviously super tough atmosphere and environment. That was a talking point throughout the week. Going into the Dome, last time they played there, the early 2000s, Notre Dame lost. But Notre Dame has played ACC teams extremely well. They've beat them 26 consecutive times in the regular
Oh,
season. So that's kind of been a good recipe for Notre Dame and Syracuse. Absolutely no pushover of a team. They played Clemson pretty tough the week
oh yeah.
before. Um, so I'm pretty sure Syracuse ended up being favored, and it was like a pick 'em.
I think
But
it switched at the last minute to Notre Dame won, but
okay,
last minute.
yeah.
Yeah.
Either way, we're not talking about dramatic change
No.
here. Uh, But I think from the get go, the Brandon Joseph pick six just really set the tone of that game. Marcus Freeman has been talking the last several weeks about them wanting to start fast, and that was just huge. And I think the other big point of emphasis from that game was the way the offensive line played. They were dominant, not for all 4 quarters, but for most of the game. I think from the onset there in the first quarter, they were just plowing guys over. And this was a unit, once again, that at the beginning of the year we were expecting to be the strength of this
Yep.
team. Didn't look that way early on, but they've really come alive. And I think where the one question still remains is the quarterback. What kind of Drew Prine are they going to get this week against Clemson? He's had moments that he's looked good, but he's had a lot more of them where he's shown some inconsistencies and difficulties completing
Yeah, what's gone
passes.
on the last several games? Because like his season seemed to pinnacle in the BYU game, the North Carolina BYU games, and then all of a sudden, the last 3 games, I mean, he's not even over 50% on his completion percentage.
Yeah, it's been a real struggle, and I, tried to defend Drew Pine in the sense where, not a great receivers room, but yet these guys are getting open. Lorenzo Styles has had a couple of key drops, but the one thing that sticks out about Drew Pine is he always seems to force it to Michael Mayer, which it actually, I mean, that works out more times
Yeah,
than it
sure.
doesn't, but as far as trying to get the ball in the hands of the other receivers has just been a major difficulty. I don't know if it comes to a difficulty with reading the defenses because he's getting a lot of time to throw. And I think that what you're seeing teams do is, they're only rushing 3 linemen at times. and they're just letting guys drop back because he's having some difficulty finding those windows, and that's really been the big thing. And I don't know how much better this Notre Dame team can get with Drew Pine playing at that level. They're running extremely well. I mean, this week will be the absolute true test of
Absolutely.
basically the defining moment of this season. I mean, obviously, it's the one Notre Dame has circled on their schedule. It's the game everyone had circled on their schedule coming into the season, but it's like, all right, what kind of Notre Dame team are we going to get, especially with Drew Pine?
And now the USC game at the end of the season becomes potentially huge for USC. We thought that was a possibility when the season began. So far, even though they lost to Utah, they're still in the national championship race. So we'll keep an eye on that one as well. But first, Clemson. And I gotta tell you, I was a little bit surprised a few weeks ago when Clemson, the line started out at like 3.5 at Florida State. And I was like, look, I've gone against Clemson more than I've gone with them this year because of some of their lines, especially the Wake Forest game, which Wake Forest actually covered and almost won. But the game against Florida State, I was like, whoa, come on, 3? And then by game time, it shot up to like 6. It started out at 3.5. Again, I'm going, wait a second, whoa. Why is Clemson a 3? Should Notre Dame only be a field goal underdog at this point to Clemson?
I think what they have working in their favor is, I mean, well, maybe not even that much of a favor, is it's at home. And that's where Notre Dame has played the worst this year. That's where they lost to Marshall, did not play great in the first half against Cal, lost to Stanford, did not look good against UNLV. Yeah. So that's the other big storyline in this game is how is Notre Dame going to look at home? And I went to the Notre Dame versus Cincinnati game last year as a fan. I don't remember what the exact rankings were, but I'm almost certain they were top 10 opponents, if not both teams top 5.
Yeah, Clemson was 7.
Yeah, there was a lot of red in that stadium, and at least as of Sunday, this game still wasn't sold out. So I know that all the hotels, like pretty much within a 1,500-mile radius, are completely sold out. I think a lot of that is probably because Notre Dame has a more national fan base. But I think we're going to expect to see a lot of orange in this stadium on Saturday. So that's going to be like another key point in this game. It's like, okay, well, Notre Dame has played really well on the road. They have not looked great at home. But the team that, and I think this is something Marcus Freeman emphasized after the game, there's a video that's surfaced on Twitter of him talking to the team afterward against Syracuse, and he said, this is a damn good football team. And I really think that they are a good football team, which is why I think that line is where it's at, especially with the way Clemson has looked at times this season. Maybe going back to that Syracuse game is like maybe a little bit of a comparison with the type of opponents. But the thing is like, back to what Notre Dame team are we going to get on Saturday night, especially at home. But I'm not incredibly surprised by that. I think that it will overall probably be a close game. I don't think you've really seen Notre Dame fall out of a game. I mean, Marshall was absolutely disgusting, but and the other thing is Notre Dame beat Clemson the last time they played at home. Granted, it was a COVID year. DJ was in for Trevor Lawrence. But he had a career game, best game of his career.
Yeah, right. We all thought, wow, look at this kid. He's going to be the next Trevor Lawrence. Hasn't 100%. Worked out that way, but...
Yeah, Notre Dame won that game. Of course, lost to Clemson in the ACC championship. So, but this, new coaching staff and a lot of the same pieces are still there from Clemson. So, yeah, I guess those are some of the storylines heading in to this Saturday
and
night.
Also, DJ's coming off his worst game of the season. And so, and we've seen this before with Clemson, where they've been able to pull out this. Matter of fact, I think it was Trevor Lawrence who did it. I'm not sure, but I remember there was a Clemson. They were behind, and he puts in one of these top quarterbacks, and they wound up winning the game. Now he says DJ still his guy, but this Cade Klubnik kid is a big 5-star recruit. Didn't have great numbers. It wasn't like he lit it up in the game. Really, they've got a very talented running back And is that how Notre Dame wins the football game? Is because that's how I think they win the football game. Is their defense is going to have to outshine Clemson's defense, which is not going to be easy, but it's possible based on the quarterback situation at Clemson, which right now, after the Syracuse game, is a mystery.
Yeah, no, I think the one glaring like stat that jumps out at me heading into this game is Notre Dame coming into Saturday night, 130th in the country of 131 teams in
Wow.
red zone defense. They have allowed teams to score 100% of the time when they've gotten in the red zone. I believe 15 of 18 of those have been touchdowns. At least it was 15 of 18 at one point on Saturday. And Clemson comes into the game with the number 3 red zone offense in the country.
Okay.
So
don't get them in the red zone.
Exactly. I think the big key there is field goals, limiting Clemson to field goals. And also for the longest part of this season, Notre Dame struggled to get turnovers. Luckily, that's started to pick up lately. They had a couple fumble recoveries against UNLV, interception last week. Almost had 2 interceptions, Brandon Joseph. So turnover thing, that's going to be really important because I don't think DJ Uiagalelei has been incredibly protective of the football. I don't have his stats in front of me, but I think that is a guy that Notre Dame can have an opportunity to target in the pass game and come away with some turnovers from that aspect. But I don't think you're going to see Will Shipley put the ball on the ground a lot. So it's kind of a tough matchup. I haven't done an incredibly deep dive of what sort of skill talent Notre Dame is going to be matched up against from the offensive side, but I guess like the one positive for Notre Dame is defense has been solid. It's just not in the red zone, which is
Okay.
probably the most important part on the field. Is where they haven't been great.
Who specifically has a player or two stepped up? Because they lost, as we know. We talked about it before the season began. There were some, as usual, some key players gone, but there were some other players that needed to step up and be the man. So who's the man now? Who are the men now running that Notre Dame defense?
Well, I mean it may not come as a surprise, but it's kind of a surprise to us. Is Isaiah Foskey? He started the year out really slow. There were games like he looked incredibly pedestrian. But over the last couple of weeks, he's really ramped it up. He had 2 punt blocks against UNLV. He had, I think, 3 sacks or so. And now, over the last couple of weeks, because of his performance, he is tied for second in the country in individual sacks. Now, if you would have told me this like 3 weeks ago, I would not have believed it because, he does draw a lot of attention. So that's, a big proponent for that defense. Is obviously teams are game playing for him. That helps Notre Dame open up certain things on defense, but just really wasn't making like a game changing impact that you think a potential first round pick would make. But that has completely flipped around the last couple of weeks. He has really turned it on. One linebacker, J.D. Bertrand, early in the season, well, I guess at the midway point in the season, had a targeting call against Cal. Then comes back, had to miss the first half against North Carolina, has another targeting call in the second half of that game. So he had to miss the entire game just because of targeting. And then he got called for targeting against UNLV, but they ended up reversing the call. So, but that's a guy that's played incredibly well. He played 100% of the snaps against UNLV. He's the only player on Notre Dame's roster to do that this season. Had a great game against Syracuse, playing a little bit more limited of a role. So that's been a guy that's really showed up.
And you mentioned Joseph.
So Brandon Joseph has kind of been weird as well, similar to Foskey, where, I mean, if you look at Brandon Joseph's career, really hasn't kind of maintained his momentum from that All-American season at Northwestern as I think it was a redshirt freshman, true sophomore. And, last year at Northwestern, pretty average at best. And I think for most of the 6-7 games this season, not really a lot of Brandon Joseph making plays. And ironically, that pick six interception, the first play of the Syracuse game, that was the first pick six of his entire career, going back to high school, youth football, everything in general. And you think of Brandon
right.
Joseph as this, like, ball hawk, lurking safety, and he's never had a pick six before. So I think that Syracuse game could certainly be a turning point for
Absolutely.
him. He's starting to play better. But I think those are probably the three main guys that I look to that have played well on this defense, with a number of other contributors also stepping
Yeah, and
up.
those were, looking into the preseason, the three big names we were thinking about. So have there been any other out of the other group of guys that are all contributing, the other contributors on defense? Any one specific guy that catches your eye that, you know what, watch out, I think he might be ready, or maybe I see it next year?
Yeah, I think the one that comes to mind immediately is Benjamin Morrison. He's a freshman cornerback.
Okay.
He enrolled in June, coming from Arizona. He's got a pretty good bloodline. I think his dad played in the NFL, certainly played football at a high level. And he comes in June, really makes an impact in training camp. He gets in the two deep right away, automatically from the get-go, playing a lot against Ohio State, played a lot against Marshall. And I think it was against the Cal game, they roll him out as a starting cornerback, which is pretty surprising to see a freshman on the Notre Dame defense that enrolled in, June start. Yeah. And he's been the starter every game since besides one, and it was just package related why he didn't start. I think it was against UNLV, actually. So he's a guy that, like, I like to use Pro Football Focus his grades as like a reference, not necessarily the end all be all.
Absolutely.
But I know going into last week they didn't really see him as performing well. I think he was actually the worst graded player overall on the Notre Dame defense. I don't think that's been true. He's played really well in spots, and he is getting targeted a lot because he's a freshman. He's facing some really big body receivers. There was a play last week where he went against that Syracuse tight end / wide receiver.
Gadsden.
Yes, yep, and just got absolutely beat. He didn't really have the right leverage or right positioning.
That's a mismatch at this stage of his career.
Exactly. So little things like that, but that's a guy that I think it is going to be really exciting to see grow at Notre Dame, a guy that's seeing a lot of reps. But besides that, I mean, there's a lot of veterans on this team. I mean, across the board, you're not seeing a lot of young guys play yet, and that's been the one that's maybe the most exciting to see moving forward. But I think that the veteran-laden leadership has really carried the majority of the defense.
Do you think a lot of those veterans will be gone next year?
There's a good amount. The Adamalola twins, who have played great on the defensive line this year, they're both gone after this year. Isaiah Foskey's gone. Not sure about the cornerback situation. I think Clarence Lewis will probably be gone. Cam Hart, he'll have a decision to make, but my gut feeling is he'll probably end up testing the NFL. Hasn't played well, but he's got freakish-like numbers that I think can be attractive to the NFL teams. Safety could look completely different next year. Brandon Joseph, he's got 1 year of eligibility remaining, I believe. I know he has at least some eligibility, but I'm pretty sure it's 1 year. He is most likely off to the NFL. DJ Brown, Houston Griffith, those guys. Well, Houston Griffith's out of eligibility. DJ Brown has 1 more year. I don't know if anyone's expecting DJ Brown back. He's been at Notre Dame for a while. So could see a lot of new faces in the secondary. Notre Dame has a pretty outstanding recruiting class with the defensive backs coming in. Linebackers, there's a lot of young guys hungry and ready to play. The top player in Notre Dame's class the previous year, Jalen Sneed, fringe 5-star guy, 5-star on some outlets. I can't remember what we have him rated as at Rivals, but he's certainly a top 100 player. He hasn't cracked the field yet, so that'll be a guy that once some of those older linebackers move on, like possibly Bertrand, Jack Kaiser, some of those guys. And then the D-line is going to be the most interesting position to watch because behind Isaiah Foskey, they call this the Viper position, which is essentially a weak side defensive end, pass
Yep.
rush specialist type, sort of player, hybrid offensive linebacker. Every team has their own name for it sometimes. So he's gone, and behind him, there's really not like anyone. And you saw last week that a linebacker, freshman linebacker, junior Tui Halamaka, was playing some Viper. Um, and there's a current freshman right now that name is escaping me. He'll have the opportunity to, I think Aiden Gobera is his name.
Okay.
He'll have an opportunity to play that position. There's a freshman in the 23, or he's a senior in high school right now, Preston Zinner. He's got that frame to maybe play Viper as well, but I mean, also some of the interior defensive linemen. Notre Dame kind of has some small guys that play those interior positions, and they'll have some big bodies. One guy is named Brennan Vernon. He's from Ohio, number 25 overall player in the class. He's a stud. He's like 6'5", 275. He's a massive dude. He's a mean guy. I think that's a guy you could see on the defensive line next year as well. So basically, my long-winded answer, but I think it warrants it with as many, veterans and seniors are on that team, and with Marcus Freeman really building that recruiting class last year as a defensive coordinator, keeping all those guys together this year as a head coach, I think we're probably one of the better defensive recruiting classes you've seen in the 21st century.
Did you also mention Mickey, the defensive back,
so
in the beginning of the season?
Yeah, so he was a guy that Notre Dame really expected to play in spots, and he has. But similarly to Morrison, just has not looked well. Morrison has played well, as I touched on earlier, but Mickey, on the other hand, just been mismatched a lot of times. And, part of that has been Al Golden's fault on defense, and he's taken ownership of that. He's put Mickey in some really tough positions. And then a couple weeks ago, Notre Dame's top cornerback, Tariq Bracy, who I'm surprised I haven't mentioned yet, because for the first part of the season, he had been the best defender on Notre Dame's roster, but he had a hamstring injury against BYU in the second half. He was held out a Stanford game, played limitedly against UNLV, and his backup was Jaden Mickey as a nickel-type guy, but Mickey got hurt in practice the week of the UNLV game, I think. Maybe Stanford as well. Yeah, I think it was Stanford that week because he wasn't available with an abductor strain. So I guess the prognosis there was really not knowing what to expect on his availability for the remainder of the year. Came back last week, played about 10 snaps. I didn't really recall any plays that stood out, but that's a guy they like a lot. Marcus Freeman has really credited Mike Mickens, the cornerbacks coach, for his recruiting. Same guy that's developed Sauce Gardner and Kobe Bryant at Cincinnati. I mean, look at the way Sauce Gardner's playing. You know awesome. It better than that. Looks outstanding. So, I think that's another guy they're excited about. So, I mean, the reason I probably didn't mention him was no coincidence. I mean, really hasn't done a lot this year as a freshman. Had a lot of opportunities coming into the year, but I think that's a guy definitely to be excited about moving forward.
And so Bracy is the one that you say is the number one corner on the team?
He plays more of like a nickel role, but he's been their best cornerback consistently and overall. Like I mentioned, what really hurt him was that hamstring injury against BYU and missing the Stanford game, and he's just now starting to work back, played a lot of snaps against Syracuse.
Offensively, talking recruiting, so and we touched up on this before the season began about the whole Notre Dame recruiting deal. And so right now, Buckner, if he's healthy next season, should be the starter no matter what, you would think. But where's the future at quarterback several months later? Because, again, we talked about it before the season began. Has anything changed?
I can say with 100% confidence that I don't know. And the reason I can say that is because Notre Dame doesn't even know. Quarterback recruiting, to put it lightly, in the 2023 class has been a disaster. The fault mainly falls on Tommy Rees, the offensive coordinator, but he doesn't get 100% of the blame. It's more like 95% because they thought they were going to get Dante Moore, a 5-star quarterback out of Detroit. He basically was a silent commit. He told Notre Dame he was coming. Ultimately, had a change of heart, went to Oregon. I think everyone can put 2 and 2 together there on why a kid from Detroit, Michigan ended up choosing to go to Eugene, Oregon to play his college football. And that was a big blow. And basically where Tommy Rees faltered is that they kind of put all their eggs in one basket with Dante Moore. And, I mean, part of that was because, at a point he did tell him he was coming. He just didn't make a public announcement. He wanted to visit other schools. And I think those visits initially went from, hey, I only go through this recruiting process once, let me enjoy it, to turning into, okay, I'm actually giving these schools a real legitimate look. So that just really put Notre Dame in an extremely tough spot recruiting quarterbacks. As they invested in him completely. All their other targets, Jackson Arnold, Chris Vizina, they committed elsewhere. Avery Johnson was a guy that they liked but cooled on. He commits to Kansas State. They've tried to reach out to him, but not getting a lot of good signs coming back from him. They tried to go off after Austin Novosad. They brought him on a visit in late July. He ended up sticking with his Baylor commitment. He also had Ohio State and Texas A&M targeting him.
Is the one major issue how hard it is academically? Is that the major thing? No.
So.
Okay, so why is it so hard for all of these years to recruit the quarterback position at Notre Dame?
I think part of it is because they just get so laser focused on one guy, and that's the guy they want, and it has not happened. And it is mind-boggling.
Yes.
Academics are an issue, but I think part of the reason also is, I mean, Notre Dame has not developed quarterbacks well, as in terms of NFL type prospects. I mean, Ian Book was a 4th-round pick. Deshaun Kaiser, he was a 2nd-round pick.
That's not sexy. Majorly. No.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why you're seeing a lot of these top guys go to USC, Oklahoma. I don't know about Oregon, but Tennessee. But Ohio State's been the big one, obviously. Alabama, those sorts of schools. So, I mean, I think that's the other thing as well. And, like I mentioned, that I think it ultimately comes down to that they really focus on one guy. They don't get him, but I do want to make a minor transition in that because in the 2024 class, they did focus on one guy, CJ Carr, potential 5-star quarterback, extremely highly rated. Grandson of Lloyd Carr, lives 8 miles from the Michigan campus or whatever. He commits to Notre Dame because of his relationship with Tommy Rees and because of the message from Marcus Freeman. He has been in Notre Dame's class since June. So I guess looking forward in the 2024 class, there's a lot to be excited about because they have a quarterback. Notre Dame wants him so bad that they want him to reclassify in the 23 class. CJ is actually 17 right now. He's an older senior. Okay. Not to go too crazy here, but he started high school late. He served a church mission trip, so he essentially should be a senior. Notre Dame wants him to reclassify. Everything Carr has told me, he's pretty comfortable in the 24 class, but he is giving consideration to it. So, I mean, I guess it's not all's lost, but in terms of next season,
that's still potential. And then you look in, does he start as a freshman, and it's a couple of years away, and can Buckner be the guy for a couple of years? But you still have the transfer portal.
That's their one saving grace, hopefully, is to find a guy from the portal. And I'm not certain that they're going to go that route, but if they don't get a quarterback in the 23 class, I'm like 95% sure that's the route they'll go because they need bodies in that room.
It blows my mind when I see, like, Texas Tech. Their starting quarterback goes down. They bring the number 2 guy in, and hey, it's not bad. Number 2 guy goes down. Number 3 guy comes up against Oklahoma State and has a tremendous game. He's not bad either, and he's a number 3 quarterback on a team. And so it's like I know it's not an exact science, and I get that, but it just shows you though that because of the transfer portal, guys like that, they don't have to hang around teams now if they feel like that guy's blocking me, I'm not even sure Cade McNamara is going to stay at Michigan. To tell you the truth,
and that's a guy that Notre Dame could go
Yeah.
after. He committed to Notre Dame at one time. He flipped his commitment. I don't know if it was exactly to Michigan, but I'm almost certain it was. But I did want to circle back onto one thing you said, just for clarification's sake, when you were talking about the academic
Okay.
things. I was more so touching on for prospective students, so kids in high school right now. I don't think that's a big problem. However, where there is some difficulty is getting undergraduate transfers to Notre Dame because the admissions requirements are so strict.
Okay.
So Notre Dame has, for the most part, had to rely on grad transfers when taking kids from the portal.
Interesting.
So that has been one thing that has hindered them from adding pieces of the roster. So they're pretty much hamstrung to only taking grad transfers, which, I mean, doesn't completely eliminate the pool, but significantly dilutes it.
Okay, good point. Before I let you go, so Marcus Freeman, great at this point. How do the fans feel about the job he's done?
Well, I judge it every week by, at least for the home games, when they introduce the football team, they say, and, your Dick Corbett head football coach, Marcus Freeman. The first week against Marshall, it was an arousing standing ovation, like loudest I've heard the stadium probably this season. Certainly gotten quieter as the home games have come on, but I think we're going to hear a pretty loud one on Clemson Saturday night. Biggest thing, he's learning on the job, and you're starting to see that. And Notre Dame's an impatient fan base. All fans, for the most part, are pretty impatient. But I think there's a lot to like about Freeman. I think, just in my opinion, he was the right hire for Notre Dame. It's going to take some time. And I'm basing my opinion basically off of the recruiting classes because he's been outstanding on the recruiting trail. Once these guys come in, have the opportunity to make an impact right away. And, I think like putting on a grading scale, I think right now a C. I mean, that's kind of lame. It's right in the middle. Right. Part of that's because he's a first-year head coach, but I think by the end of the year we might be talking like a B plus, especially with a win against Clemson.
Yeah, or USC. So two opportunities for one season-defining win, and that'll be important. What would then be his biggest issue? Has he been okay with game management? Is there something that you can point to and go, that's the one thing he really needs to improve upon?
Well, it's hard to say 100% because we're not there behind like closed doors. But the one thing that I can kind of point to is like preparation. And the one reason I say that is just because that's kind of what. So when Marcus Freeman answers a question, obviously when the reporters ask him one, he either gives like 15 different answers to the one question, or it's just he's kind of confusing to understand sometimes. But I guess for the most part, from what I've been able to gather, there's just been a little bit like certain things each week he's hit on, like starting fast, urgency, execution, playing for 4 quarters, like just certain things like that. Like they just really haven't put it all together, and they've been really good at times, but they also been really bad. So I think that kind of all culminates together, and kind of the result of a first-time head coach.
Enough. Kyle, appreciate it as always. Can't wait to talk to you again at some point, whether it's USC week or no later than bowl week. Will you go to the bowl wherever it is?
I hope so.
It all depends.
Especially if it's in like San Diego or Orlando. I'll find a way to get there maybe.
And then, of course, the playoff picture opens up in what is it? Do we know yet? Is it a year, 2 years? When is that coming in?
The new
12
college
team
football playoff.
Do we know when that's?
I think it's 2024.
Okay, yeah, it's a couple more years. So so that makes it a lot easier for Notre Dame. That's for sure.
Makes it almost extremely easy for Notre Dame in a sense.
Yeah,
well, not extremely, but I mean, there's been a lot of years Notre Dame has finished in the top 12.
That's true, and then by then, who knows what happens? But we'll hopefully still be talking Notre Dame football between now and then. So, Kyle, appreciate it. And you have something else going on right now? You going to be interviewed anywhere else? Is it all recruiting really at this point for you?
And I'm my head is almost completely involved in recruiting right now, just because it's going to be a pretty big recruiting week at Notre Dame. So I'm pretty active on our message board right now on rivals.notredame.com. Insider Lounge is where you can find me. I've been putting a lot of insider info, scoop as much as I can, as fast as I can get it throughout the last couple weeks. So that's where I'm at most of the times. And yeah, let's hoping to see if maybe there's a quarterback on campus this week for Notre
Well,
Dame.
we'll have the links to all of those places in the description area of this video. So check that out. Makes it easy for you to also check out Kyle's Twitter account and also the was it Inside ND Sports Twitter account, I believe.
Yes, sir.
So check that out.
Yep.
You can see it up on the ticker that's been flashing up there throughout the entire interview. And Kyle, like I said, I look forward to talking to you again at some point before the bowl game.
Likewise.